We'll call this meeting to order. I'm going to get a roll call vote, please.
Mayor Larry Milton,
Here.
Acting City Administrator Lisa Westfall,
Here.
Alderman Ralph LeBlanc,
Here.
Alderman Chuck Rodriguez,
Here.
Kevin McConnell,
Here.
and Lane McConnell.
Here.
Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we start the meeting, this is a new committee, and I would like to maybe have everybody introduce themselves and give just a brief history of the value they're bringing to this committee. We'll start with Lane.
My name is Lane McConnell, and
You need to really talk close.
How's this?
There you go.
My name's Lane McConnell, and I sit on Branson School Board. We have been a resident of Branson for the past 13 years. I have a background in working with state government, with the Missouri Department of Agriculture, worked in HR and in marketing, and started the Branson Farmers Market at the Landing many years ago. Have worked with the Landing and some other organizations here in Branson, but I also have served on some city and state boards in the past. So happy to be here and serve my time.
Well, thank you. Welcome, Lane. I think we know Alderman Chuck. Kevin?
So Kevin McConnell served on the HR committee for several years previously, prior to some political winds that blew and removed me from said committee. Glad to be back. Enjoy serving, have a background in human resources, owning a staffing company for about 8 years, and now we have a Ember Cigar Lounge down at the Landing. And we've been involved in the community and able to do lots of things through that. Happily married to my lovely wife Betsy, who's also served on city council, and I believe she's going on the finance committee. So I'm glad to be here. Also, one quick point of clarification: while Lane and I are very good friends, we are not related. We just both share a very popular last name.
Thank you.
That it was.
So, Kevin, you're not wanting to share your previous alderman experience, HR?
Oh
no.
gosh, look at the time.
Okay, we all know Alderman Ralph and the City Administrator Lisa. So, we'll go to the first agenda item. It is, we'll get a staff report from Jan.
Mayor, we generally start everything out with approval of the previous meeting's minutes, realizing it was clear back in February. All but one of you was not at that meeting. So, Mayor, you should approve the minutes.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Aye. Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign? Ayes have it.
There you go.
Lisa gives me that look. Okay, then we'll go down to the discussions of HR committee responsibilities, timeline, topics, and suggestions.
Yeah. Mayor, the point of this is, since we've got a new alderman on the committee and new community members, we thought it'd be nice just to walk through and talk about
Raise that up. Yeah.
talk about what the excuse me, what the expectations are of the committee itself, and essentially reflecting what city code has to say about that. We need to get taller people here. That being said, the first thing I want to point out is, what we did is we took this information straight from our city code, because ultimately, we have a tendency to have a little bit of scope creep throughout the years. We get into things that we look at and we think, okay, well, let's do this, let's let the committee do that. And to a certain degree, we want to make sure that we're doing the right things for our employees and for the community itself, because we're spending real dollars whenever we're doing what we do, whenever we're dealing with employees and employee issues. The first thing is to review and make recommendations to the board regarding all amendments to the city's human resources manual. That is essentially our policy manual. In our policy manual, in itself, we have things that are specific to classified and unclassified employees. Typically speaking, an unclassified employee is going to be someone like the city administrator any of the directors, part-time people, and things like that. The focus of the HR manual, however, is strictly for classified employees. That's everybody between part-time employees and directors. So that's roughly about 260 employees, roughly speaking. The one thing that I really want to start focusing on and kind of wind back the clock to earlier days, and that is to review and make recommendations to the board regarding all amendments to salary schedules for each budget year. We had been submitting this information for years, and it just been stripped out of the budget process. I think the board has an inherent right and a responsibility to be able to see that stuff. Salaries, that's one of the biggest expenses, if not the biggest expense the board's going to have, and they need to have that information at hand. So those are things that I want to make sure we review and we go through on a regular annual basis.
Thank you, Jan. That is very important. As you know, over half of our budget is salaries. So out of all the funds that the board makes decisions on, this is the single biggest item.
Absolutely.
So we appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. And then the next item on this chart, if you will, the bullet item, is to review employee benefits packages annually. That's something that we've done as a matter of course, but again, it goes into the overall scope of it's not our money that we're spending. This is taxpayer dollars, and we need to make sure that we're getting the best bang for the buck. We currently spend, excuse me, somewhere in the neighborhood of a little over $3 million on our insurance packages. That's a lot of money. We have a very rich insurance package, and those are the kinds of things that I want to take a hard look at with respect to, are we getting the best bang for the buck? We've had presentations over the past couple of years about self-funding on our insurance. That's an area that I see as we've got opportunities to make significant gains with respect to cutting expenditures and things like that. Those are things that I think are quite important. Is it still too low? Okay. Gotta have the mayor come down and do it for me. There we go. All right. Is this better? Okay. Was it not coming through before? I could hear it.
That's for the people listening online.
I got you. I got you. Like I said, we spend north of $3 million annually on our medical insurance packages, and there's lots of opportunities. The one thing, just kind of get in your brain to start thinking about, we've been with Anthem for roughly about 30 years, and the package has been somewhat the same. We get the same thing over and over and over again, and I just want to make sure we're getting the best value for the dollars we spend. I'm not sure we are, but I'm not sure we're not either. So I want to make sure, and our part of Human Resources' job is to do its due diligence, bring to this committee for review an in-depth deep dive, so then you can make a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen. So that's an important function that it's going to be coming up before too long. So I want to kind of start getting it on your radar right now. The one thing that, frankly, we've not done a very good job with, and I want to make some significant improvements on, and that is making policies with respect to the board regarding employee development. Currently, all of our employee development processes are tracked manually and things like that. I will be talking later about a software package that I'd like to bring to the table. I've been talking about it for a year, had stumbling blocks in the way that has prevented us from getting there, but it's a package that it's called Learning Management System, an LMS, that tracks that information for us. It tracks what employees have been taught, what they've been through with respect to for succession planning purposes, and I'm guaranteeing you in the next 5 years, succession planning is going to be a big deal here. because we have to have that bench strength to fill those positions whenever we see retirement coming down the pike, that kind of thing. But moreover, with a quality LMS, we've got the ability to designate, or show, I should say, that we've taught employees on certain things. So like in the event that there's a safety issue and somebody violates the policies that they've been taught, that mitigates the city's exposure to that kind of thing. So any kinds of lawsuits or work comp claims or things like that could be mitigated in that respect simply because we've done our due diligence. And this is an area I seriously want to improve upon. And then the last part is to assume other responsibilities as may from time to time be assigned by the board. So we've got 2 aldermen and the mayor on this committee. So they are the direct conduit from the board. And in that respect, if the board comes up with its directives that wants this committee to do something, that will then be charged to us and we'll figure it out from there. So any questions on any of these bullet items before we move on? Okay, if you would please. Again, like I said earlier, the benefit information that we typically go through is in August. We typically get our claims data for our insurance. We get the prior year's claims generally around August 1st. Now, they say, Anthem tells us that they can't get it to us any earlier than August 1st. Go figure, they've had our business for 30 years. They can't figure out what our claims usage have been over that period of time. But, okay, we've heard this story many times. But ultimately, we look at this as something that we have to back into because we start our new plan year on January 1st, so we have to back into it. When we go through the process of trying to figure out what's the best value for the city, juxtapose the needs of employees, that's a process that takes a little bit of time. Then when you add on top of that a contract review through our legal team, and then we have to bring it to the HR committee for its recommendation, and then we take it to the board for a first and a second read. Then we have to do open enrollment, and then we have to integrate that data over into our payroll system, and then at the same time send that information over to the carriers. That's a protracted process, so we have to get started. Generally, I would love to get started in July, but August 1st has generally been the earliest we can get started with that. So those are things that, we want to try to, get on your radar so that, whenever we have meetings coming up in the October, November timeframe, we may, based on timing of information and things like that, we may need a little bit of help with respect to a special HR committee meeting. We may need to be able to throw one in someplace just to fit our deadlines and things like that.
Jan, I understand you've been asking for quite a while to get the information from our carrier prior to August 1st. Would it be of any benefit of all if that request came from the board itself and said, because of the reasons you described, we'd really appreciate getting that information early?
I would appreciate if the board could do that. Honestly, I hear the same thing year after year after year that, we get our second versus other people that get some other firm gets their organization gets theirs first. But it's the same routine year after year.
Sure. So is that something that, Lisa, do we need to put that on the agenda and have the board approve that? Let's do that if we could.
I've got notes on that to
Okay.
work through it for additional discussion, because
You need to.
I totally agree. You've heard me say this multiple times, back into
Yeah.
these things. The same thing I'm talking about, building calendars to back into
Yeah.
major contracts. So this would be one of those, and we could put that out to the carrier. But we're only talking one carrier,
Right.
and I think Jan probably has input to expand on that.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, the next big rock that we're going to be dealing with as a committee is going to be surrounding our staffing study. We want to do a staffing study and we want to do a compensation study. We typically do the compensation study usually every 3 or 4 years, somewhere in that range. Our success has been, in my opinion, we've had better success when we do our compensation study when we perform it internally. What happens is whenever you do a staffing study, if you hire an outside firm to do it, or a salary study, you hire an outside firm to do it, well then they generalize the constituency that they survey. You know, one size fits all. You know, the police department will maybe look at Springfield, and then water utilities will look at Springfield, and so on. Just the same municipalities or the same entities over and over. And we had been doing that in the past, and the interesting part was we weren't comparing apples to apples. You know, we had a different water treatment process. You know, we were using Harrison, Arkansas as our comparator, and their water treatment process is totally different than how we do it here. The skill level and things like that that they do for their water treatment is totally different than ours. So what we did, our most recent salary study, is we asked the directors to find those municipalities that best fit the way they do business, and let's compare them. And then like for police and fire, we asked, let's look at those folks to where you lose employees, and let's compare ourselves to them as well. So we did that, and we had a very robust and a very, in my opinion, a very solid salary study that showed, by and large, we weren't in too bad a shape overall, but we did identify some areas where we needed to make some changes. The one area in particular where we made some significant changes was in our dispatch. Our dispatch unit, that they were seeing constant turnover, and their wages were, you know, probably approaching 20% lower than the peers. So we made some quick adjustments to that, and this committee was a big part of that to get that through to the Board of Aldermen. And that was one where they really appreciated that very much. Part of what we want to also do is we want to be able to do this staffing study. I want to kind of talk about that for just a second, because, you know, when you look at our budget versus our employees that we've got on board, we look at them and we refer to them as an FTE, a full-time equivalency. Well, the thing about it is, in our organization, I think, frankly, at one point, you know, it probably made sense the way it was constructed. But the reality is we've made so many migrations based on technology and consolidation of services and things like that, that, you know, we've tried our best to save money in different areas. But an FTE, you know, if it takes me 50 hours to do my job and I'm working diligently and I'm not sloughing off, I'm not standing at the water cooler for 3 or 4 hours at a time, but I'm staying busy with my work, and it takes me 50 hours to get it done, that's 1.25 FTE. And that's the part where we're overburdening, we could be overburdening some folks. And that's part of the area where I like to look at, where's our turnover? Where's the biggest focus of our turnover? And that's the big point that, you know, the one thing I'll say is our turnover. I brought our 2021 statistics with us, but our police, for their 5-year average, has about a 12% turnover. But last year, we had 79 employees. Now, we've got it labeled as FTE, but that's truly just head count. We have 79 employees in police. We lost 11 of them. In utilities, we have 51 employees, and we lost 10 of in fire, we had 48 employees and we lost 3. Public Works and engineering, they're combined. We have 33 employees, we lost 5. The bulk of that, though, is in Public Works. And then in Parks, we had 26 employees and we lost 4. So we're losing some fairly significant percentages. In Parks in particular, we're losing them in leadership opportunities simply because there's better things out there for people to grow to. And that's, with this environment, the job environment, that's a big risk for us in losing our leadership roles. And that's one thing that I want to make sure that through our staffing study, we identify those things that make sense for us to be able to staff appropriately and compensate appropriately. You know, the one thing with respect to like the police department, you know, we typically will have multiple employees working at the same time, but what's the breadth of what they have to cover? You know, it may be more than what's reasonable. We don't know that. And that's part of what we want to do in our staffing study is we want to get down into the granular level and see what is the scope of services that we provide. What is for utilities, what's the feet or the miles of pipeline that we service and things like that, or the waste that we process, things like that. We want to get down to that granular level and make sure that we're staffed appropriately. So anyhow, the whole premise of this is so that we can get all of this done and get it ready by January 1.
Jen, let me interrupt if I can for just a minute. I'm speaking about police. I was in a meeting with Chief Matthews and others yesterday, and my understanding is we are trying to gear up to have 53 patrol officers. It was 56. And so one question would be, would you take just a minute and explain to this committee, recently there was an agreement of reducing our cap from 56 to 53 patrol officers and allowing our officers to receive, I believe it was an extra $2 an hour.
That's right.
And the second point was, out of the 53 officers, we're currently down 19.
I think we've got quite a few in the pipeline.
In the pipeline. I think there's 5 or so in the pipeline.
Yeah.
But as of today. And so I just wanted to reemphasize the concern of helping Chief Matthews staff up and keep that as a focal point to get him some additional help. But if you'd explain that $2 increase.
Well, the $2 increase was, it was a number that was established by the previous city administrator and the finance director. The HR department was not involved in that. It was distributed across the board, and inasmuch as it made a dent on that, I'm not sure it fixed it completely. The one thing, though, you know, and I'm talking about turnover, they lost 11 employees last year. That's 11 employees when you're understaffed, you know, so that gap gets even bigger when you think about it in that respect. So they're doing incredible work with very few resources, and this is one of those areas that I think ultimately we're going to have to invest in that area. You know, it might not be the most popular thing across the board, but it's one of those that I think we have to focus on before, you know, because what the public expects is to be safe, and that's you know, that's going to be a big deal for us.
Yeah.
So Kimberly, if you would, thank you. Here's the plan, and I got a little deep into that. That's going to be a separate topic, the next topic, and we'll get a little deeper, so to speak. But coming up on other things with the HR committee, our insurance benefits, we look at that annually. The pay plan, we look at annually. The manual, the employee manual, we look at that as we need it. We haven't made significant changes in a while. One of the big areas that we're looking at right now has to do with paid time off and things like that, but it's contingent upon us getting a staffing study and making sure that we've got things in place from a personnel perspective, because we've got a lot of paid time off, and one of the areas that we want to address is the payout of sick leave upon termination of employment. Those are things that the committee prior had serious questions on. Why are we doing that? So we want to come up with a good solution for that. Our turnover report, we generally, like I said, we talk about that. The first part of the year, we get through the open enrollment period, we pull that data and make sure all the status change forms are in place, and we knock that out, generally the meeting in February. Typically, we have Bob in here, but he's not in here today, who comes in and will do a safety briefing, give us an update on things like that. And the one thing that we're not going to be doing that today, but in a brief update on that, I will say that we've been quite effective in our safety, in our work with safety across the organization. Bob goes out and meets with different departments and goes through specific training issues and such. But we are, based on our reduced claims, we're going to get a refund, and it will be presented at the next Board of Aldermen meeting. We'll get a refund of about almost $49,000 on our work comp. So that shows real progress in what we're trying to achieve from a safety perspective. And then we like to do the new hire and the promotional update on a monthly basis. It was asked that we stop that, but the original initiation of that was based on the fact that the Board of Aldermen did not know who new employees were whenever they would come on board, and they felt it was important to be able to see who's now an employee of their organization. So we stopped that a few months ago, and we would like to initiate it again.
I recall seeing that, and I thought that was very beneficial. How long ago did we stop that?
Oh, January, maybe December. I'm not sure.
Do you know why we stopped presenting that?
My guess is there was a spate of promotions in one department, and it was embarrassing.
I can't let that one go. At a future committee, HR meeting, would you be able to go back and provide us with that information that the committee and the board should have seen?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we need to have that as we move forward.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, now this is your time to speak up. Are there any things that you as a committee want to focus on? You know, it's kind of our opportunity, or your opportunity, to kind of give us some direction on what your expectations are going to be.
I'd like to hear comments from the committee.
I had a question about the staffing study.
Okay.
We used to conduct that every year when I worked in state government, and I worked for a couple other companies that we did that every year. Now, you talked about the compensation study, doing that every 3 years?
Right.
Is a staffing study done with that, or is a staffing study done every year too?
We have not done a staffing study, period.
In the past, have you always done that internally, or have you had an outside company?
We always have, from a salary perspective, we've always had an outside firm do it until this last time, when we saw it worked better when we did it internally.
Okay.
And Jen, I recently learned that we've done the last couple staffing studies. I don't know if they're staffing studies or salary studies.
Salary studies.
We would pay an outside firm to do that. They would bring in their reports. However, there was no action taken on those. And so recently, when we were talking about doing another outside study, That's when I was told about the history of that, and that's when Jan suggested, well, it'll be more effective if we do that in-house.
Right.
Is that right?
Exactly, because the fact that we were using, comparing apples to oranges in the one where we last outsourced it, the city administrator chose not to implement it, do anything with it. So that's, it was kind of money not well spent.
Any other questions from the committee? Things you'd like to see? Oh, Lisa.
Mayor, just a couple of comments on the procedure to bring in the salary study. One concern is the timeline that we might want to consider because, and maybe Jen has a plan for this, but the impact on the budget. So when you look at it going to the Board of Aldermen on November, your budget impact is going to be well before that to figure that salaries in there. And now, there is a rule of thumb I know that the city's used in the past to do a percentage, and maybe Jan has that thought. But I think it's important that we look at the impact on the budget because, again, that's our largest impact on our budget. And we would want to make sure that comes through here and in place, or at least a number for the budget to be worked on. So November's, it's a tight time frame, I know.
Oh, absolutely. Kind of go back to what I wanted to talk about in the next presentation piece here, has to do with our use of our applicant tracking platform that we use right now. We currently are with Acquire. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give it about a 3. It's better than paper, but not much. It doesn't have, it's not very robust. It's not particularly end user friendly or anything like that. The support is abysmal. And so we've had our eye on a different package for a long time. And that one is the NeoGov, like I was talking about with the learning management system. The part about NeoGov is that is the #1 governmental applicant tracking system of all of them out there. And they have statistical information on all of their customers all built in. So once we identify what our comparators are, it's just simply a process of going, if we were to employ that package, it'd be simply a process of going online and see what the competition has for a salary study. Be quick and easy, something that we could turn around in a very short time frame versus making lots of phone calls and things like that.
Jan and Lisa, I want to remind everybody that when we were specifically talking about police and fire back in January, February, I made it clear that I know we're not going to, like Lisa just said, we're not going to get into the staffing studies and all that until we get to budget, and then it'll get to the end of the year. I really, in fact, I either made a commitment or a promise that we were going to revisit specifically the police in June of this year.
Mm-hmm.
June's next month.
Right.
Would you be able to carve out and be able to address specifically our police officers, our patrolmen, in a separate conversation of what can we do to shore that up?
Absolutely. That's part of our plan that we're going to, in our next presentation, we're going to talk about, and that's going to be to focus on those high impact areas, like doing a staffing study for finance, HR, makes no sense at this point. Obviously, we want to hit the areas that are most impactful, where we have the highest turnover. And in my mind, we're looking at the top of my list there with respect to police, utilities, fire, public works, and parks. And to carve those out, we can do them in sequential order. We can carve out police first, utilities next, and go on down the road like that. The reality is Kimberly has been working very diligently on a timeline for these things, and we're ready to pull the trigger.
Pull the trigger.
Okay.
Does this committee agree that we want to, we need to address the police? And I did ask to have this in June, so is this committee in agreement that that's what your desires are? Yeah, okay. So if we would,
Okay.
can we proceed with that? Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And also, the last thing on this particular slide is we currently meet the third Wednesday of the month at 9:30. Just doing the housekeeping. Is this a good time? Is there a better time? You know, it's been this way for quite a while. Sometimes whenever we have board meetings the night before, we used to have them on Wednesdays right after board meetings, and so when the aldermen, they'd have to be there till 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. It was a little bit of a chore to get up and be there and get all that. So I just wanted to clarify if this date and time works for this committee.
What would be the simplest way? Would it be a doodle poll for this committee and ask what opinions are for dates and times and try to accommodate the majority?
Well, unless we can just agree now, it would be best to have a set time, so set day, set time. There's opinion.
The challenge is so many variables. So, for example, day of the week doesn't matter to me. I'd love to do it earlier, but I'm okay with this time. I would just assume it not be any later, but I'd love to do it earlier. But then other people might have an idea about a different day or something like that. So, I would be up for anything earlier on the same day. But if we want to leave it the same, or if anybody has any other opinion, maybe we could just share. That would be my 2 cents.
Well, that'll be one of many things we disagree on.
There would be many, I'm sure.
Yeah, I was hoping it would be more midday. Ralph, Chuck, you're shaking your head.
I would say this time works, or maybe even earlier.
Boo.
I have to boo the earlier too, so this is a good time.
Holy
and
shit, I'm crashing and
late
burning up
evening's
here.
not good on Wednesdays, so.
Ralph?
I'm not gonna rock the boat here.
Tiebreaker.
I only work
Okay.
17 and a half hours a week anyway.
So what I heard was they want it midday, later in the day, possibly evenings. Wednesday's a good day for everybody?
Make adjustments.
Okay.
Is there a better day?
Friday, but I don't know.
What?
No, I know.
Friday.
That's kind of
Some
my
are
consensus too.
Somebody's
You know,
going up, you know.
Monday morning, I don't know. Mondays. I just, my 2 longest days are Tuesday and Wednesday, where like, you know, like I'm normally seeing patients now.
You need to
You know,
speak into your mic, please. People online can't hear
okay.
us.
So, but I'm okay. I mean, I can make lateral movements within my office to adjust for, I mean, it's just 1 day a month, so.
Who runs
unless we
your
have a
place?
special. I'm sorry?
Who runs your place?
My wonderful wife, Cherie.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So, yeah.
Lane?
Fridays are not good for me. We are usually out of town for basketball or baseball or softball.
Yeah.
But any other day, mid-morning or afternoon is good, so.
So if we stayed on Wednesday, and I'm hearing the board wants it earlier than 9:30, are you thinking like, 9:15? 8:30, 9? What do you,
Either one of those.
either one? Ralph, would you be okay
I
with
would
that?
do earlier. That would help.
Lane?
Yeah.
I think they're saying 6.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to nix the 6.
Yeah.
But I can do earlier, so, I mean, Wednesdays are good, as long as, it's not gonna go into the evening hours, so.
Well, if these meetings start going into the evening hours, Jan will have a one-on-one with us. Okay, 9 o'clock or 8:30? 8:30?
I'd go 8:30.
I'm
I'll
hearing
do
8:30. So
8:30
Lisa,
Wednesday.
could we amend this meeting, keep them on Wednesday,
Yeah.
change the time to 8:30 in the evening?
What's the location?
Would you like a motion? Yes. They would like a motion.
Oh,
And then we'll have
Do I
it-
hear a motion to change the date and time of this meeting?
Mayor, I make a motion to make the time at 8:30, the third Wednesdays of the month.
I second it.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Opposed. Ayes have it. Thank you very much.
That went well.
Okay. All right. Any chance we could zoom that up just a tad? There we go. Okay, the next part is I want to talk about our staffing study. Run through that piece with everybody. We're looking at multiple phases of this study. And as we have laid out here, we're pretty much ready to go with a lot of the construct of what we want to do. Now we just have to go meet with people and compile information. So based on pulling the trigger right away, we can get, we're projecting a completion date of this phase 1 of the staffing study of June 10th. That would be establishing a scope for each city department, prioritize all functional areas, analyze the workflows, and so on. You can read those just as well as I can, but the one thing, this is the highly interactive period where we go through and we say, okay, what are your metrics that you identify your workloads on? How many calls for service do you make? How many arrests do you make? How many miles of pipeline do you service? Things like that, where we go through that process and we identify the coverage areas for each employee and what the expectations are going to be on that. And if you scroll down a little bit.
And to clarify, for this part of the study, we're just going to do those 5 departments that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, those priority departments. And that way we can focus on the high impact area first. It's not to say that we're not going to circle back and do the others. Don't want to say that. But we've got limited resources. And, you know, we're going to be going through a lot of other things at the same time. You know, we're watching over another department, and we're going to begin the benefits package before too long, looking at insurance and all of that stuff. We got a lot of things going on, so if we can prioritize the high impact areas first, I think that's time well spent. The second phase of this that we want to get by July 15th is the classification analysis. Currently, each employee has a classification, you know, like the interesting part is our classifications start at 1C, C for classified against, and go all the way up to 40C. We don't use 1 through 9 or 1 through 8, but we do use 9 through 40. And at this point, we've found that 9C has an entry-level rate that is not competitive with the current market out there. It's only slightly above minimum wage, what minimum wage is going to be first part of the next year. And so these are the things that we want to be able to address and focus on, looking at those and making sure that we're addressing what the classification range is for each particular job. And then frankly, you know, in the past, our processes have kind of messed up our overall internal equity. We've got people who have fewer responsibilities but yet are higher paid. And that's something we want to fix, we want to address. I'm not particularly looking at decreasing anyone's pay. However, I want to look at what the classification range is for that particular role and compare that to one that's got similar or more responsibilities and make sure that the range is adjusted appropriately. part of this mess up has to do with the fact that we had some departments that would establish what they felt this person should make. They would take it directly to the city administrator, get approval, and HR was kind of boxed out of it. We need to be able to enforce what our policies are in the HR manual and make sure that it's going through human resources to ensure that there's internal equity throughout the organization. That's an area that I would really want to focus on.
Let me share a little concern with that. That some of the decisions that were made from previous administration with approving salary adjustments, knowing what our salary demands are on our entire budget and looking to get a good handle on where we are financially, I think we need to be a little bit sensitive to that. For example, I know, just a real quick recap, last year the board approved, this committee recommended, the board approved using the ARPA money for the stipends for 2021 and 2022. Then the board approved a 7% increase across the board, 4% for admin and 7% for all others. My understanding is that 7% increase that we approved equaled $1.2 million to our budget, some figure around the 1.2 million. 1.2 million on our existing budget, that's a stretch. So I appreciate the fact that we want to balance everything out, but I'd sure like to see what those economic impacts are after we've been able to see what our how our recent decisions have impacted our budget. So appreciating the theory of somebody shouldn't be getting paid more if they have less responsibility. We need to be able to make sure we can afford it.
Right.
Thank you.
Exactly. You can see from the list there that, we want to take, we want to establish certain factors with respect to, how essential is the job function? What are the FLSA requirements for the job? And the one thing, I want to employ the standards that we use from a prior staffing or a salary study where we use kind of what they refer to as the SAFE methodology. We look at different factors of the job, and one of those factors is going to be the safety incurred in that particular job. Somebody sitting behind a desk would score less on a safety factor versus someone who is carrying a weapon and pulling people over, that kind of thing.
For utilities.
So, yeah, exactly. So those are the kinds of things that we want to make sure we've got a good equitable balance in there so that we can defend that to tell employees, look, these are the factors surrounding your particular position. This is what makes sense. And, people may say, well, I've got the same title as this person over here. How come they get paid more than I do? That kind of thing. We need to be able to justify that from a material means that's quantifiable.
Yeah, and again, I also want to be cognizant of the fact that if one individual was making some of these decisions and they didn't run through HR or through the board, just need to be sensitive of where those tiers are today.
Well, and that's the one thing that I want to make sure that, we have absolute clarity and accountability for what our decisions are and what our recommendations are. I want to be able to share with the board, this is our compensation structure, this is our benefit structure, this is how much it's going to cost, and not have something that you are guessing the end amount might be and hope it might be and things like that. I want it to be very clear and very transparent.
Thank you.
We also one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to take a hard look at some of the job descriptions. As an example, I was working with Carrie and Summer and those folks over in the department across the hall, and looking at a job description that essentially, it was loaded up with a bunch of tasks. And those are things that I find not particularly useful in developing a job description, more than I want responsibilities and impact and scope of service and things like that. Because if you just list a bunch of tasks, people have a tendency to do only what those tasks are. And that's where that stems, that's the seed for the phrase that I hate more than anything else. Well, that's not my job, So those are the kinds of areas that I like to make sure that we have a generalized perspective on those things. And it's going to mean a reconstruction, if you will, of our job descriptions. And if you would, scroll down a bit. The compensation study, it looks like we should be able to plug that together. We're going to look at a lot of different things to say, what's the dollar value associated with that? When you're dealing with compensation, you have to look at the whole package. What's my benefits? What are what's my time off? What's my retirement? All of those particular things. And make sure that we can articulate those in a manner. Now, the one thing that's going to be a variable in this, that's going to make our job a little more difficult, is going to be little things with respect to how much can you telework? How much of your job can you do remotely? Because if you can do a lot of your job remotely, then there's going to be a lot less burden on you as an employee to have to travel to work and things like that. So the resource needs that we have as an organization will be reduced overall. So we just need to look at that and see what the overall impact is.
That'd be great.
And if you would scroll down. The plan integration, again, we want to be able to make changes to this, have time to be able to make updates, because we want to bring on a phase-by-phase progression, bring that to this body for review and move forward from there. And you say, hey, you're on track, or, oh, wait, you forgot this, or we need to really look at this thing. So I want to bring it to this body as a sounding board to make sure we're doing the right things. And ideally, we'd like to get it, what we've got planned here is getting it to the department heads and such in early September, and bringing it to the finalized version to this committee in late September, and then start getting it to the board as quickly as we can. Again, understanding what Lisa had talked about with respect to integrating it with the budget time frame and things like that. We may need to make some modifications, may need to accelerate certain aspects of it. But with a condensed group of employees, that should be a little easier to do. And then, again, make our final presentation to the Board of Aldermen and for final implementation for the new plan year of January 1, 2023. But that's our plan. A lot of it, again, is based on the premise that we did an RFQ for this. We got one response, and that one response was for the staffing or the salary study only. And frankly, that's the easier part. And so in that respect, we want to move forward because time's wasted. We want to get busy with it.
Jan, I really appreciate your presentation. It aligns very well with our new board, with openness and transparency, which is very much appreciated. Any committee members here have any comments or questions for Jan?
I do have a comment in reference to the staffing report. On Friday, Mr. Mayor, we were, the Board of Aldermen were tasked with sitting for 8 hours and enduring each department. Actually, it wasn't enduring, it was very enlightening. Thank you, guys. These gentlemen put together presentations that really answered a lot of the questions that Jan was asking as far as the staffing report, an analysis as far as, I know Keith's already left, but, you know, how many miles of sewer they handle and all those things. And I mean, it was a great presentation that everyone put on at each department. So that's going to make that so much easier. I mean, that heavy lift is pretty much already done. It's just a matter of push and print, probably. So
Yeah,
thank
and
you guys for all doing that. That was great.
I want to publicly thank Lisa for causing that to happen. I understand that that used to happen in the past, and I'm not sure when that discontinued, but I've heard from many of the aldermen how appreciative they were to go through and just get a firsthand look of each department as we're making decisions, right? So thank you, Lisa.
And I'll thank the directors, because they put the work in.
Sure.
Putting it on the calendar was not the hard part, so, but thanks for everybody attending.
Police won the presentation, though. You guys had it, yeah.
Maybe we can get a formal introduction to our new canine. What's his name? Flex. Flex needs to give a presentation to the board. Anything else?
I do have a question, Jan, on the staffing study.
Sure.
You mentioned that here in the next 5 years, you look to see a lot of retirements coming. And I'm guessing this staffing study will also show who in the helm currently would be able to be promoted for those positions come retirement. Because I know there's a lot, I've worked in a company in the past that has had mass exodus of retirement because a lot of those employees were all at the same age.
Right.
If we're going to be looking at that here in the next 5 years, I'm just wondering what the plan of action is as far as promotions within or hiring from within. And I'm guessing the staffing study will show that too.
It will show elements of it, but you know that kind of moves into a different area where, again, I do the plug for my learning management system for succession planning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because like in utilities, for example, you know, to be able to promote to a leadership role, you have to get certain levels of licensure and things like that. So those are the things that I want to be able to keep track of and see who's in the pipeline ready to promote, or see who need, you know, let's say we have a conversation with somebody who's sharp. You know, let's say we've got a young lady in utilities who's easily promotable. She's good at what she does. And we want to set a plan in place for her to get the training so that she can get the licensures and things like that, so that she can then move into that leadership role. Not to say we're going to guarantee that for each person, but have multiple people in that pipeline so that there is a bit of a competition, so that ultimately what I'd like to be able to do is target somewhere in the 70 to 80% for leadership roles are going to be promotions versus external hires.
Thank you. Having no other questions or comments, does that conclude your presentation?
That's it for now.
Police chief had a question.
Please, come on up, Chief.
Jen, you want to boost me up? Mayor, if I could correct something. You talked about the number 19 in the police department. I tracked down and on loan numbers, and down and on loan, I have 19 when we talked. That number is 18 now because the K-9 officer came back from training, so he's available. So he's no longer on loan
Great.
to training. So of those 18, 3 are sitting in the police academy. They're not doing police work, right? So Chief Schmidt is away, and then I have 1 officer on light duty. So when I talk 18, pull 5 of that out that I'm paying that are not doing the job. So I have 13 openings. Last week, I offered 4 positions for police officers to start the academy next month. So that number will go down by 4 as well. But that pipeline from job offer to patrolling the streets is a little over 9 months. So that pipeline is very long. I
Yeah.
just wanted to correct that it's not a total of 19. I track all the people that are not doing their primary job.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. And in that same discussion, I guess what's pulling at me is when we're down, 8, whatever that number is, today, our current patrolmen are having to cover a lot of area and a lot of time, and that has to be wearing on them. And so I know we're on the same page with that, but thanks for the clarification.
Just as a
You could just get on your knees,
Just
Jan.
as a minor point for what he's talking about, that pipeline, 9 months from hire to starting. We have a very extensive background check on our police officers. They go out and it's kind of like what my brother went through when he was in the Marine Corps, and he went through a top secret security clearance. They talk to neighbors and friends and landlords and things like that. They go through the whole gamut. We do a psychological profile on these folks to make sure that they're a good fit for the role. And frankly, we've turned some people away that, when we do our psych evals on that, they say, no, that's not a good fit. So those are the kinds of things, we make sure we do our due diligence on that. Unfortunately, it just takes time, but, chief staff, they do a great job on the background checks.
Thank you for that. And obviously, the quality of the officers is of utmost importance. And when I look at the patrolmen we currently have, their professionalism out in the field, they display that every single day, and our community really appreciates it. So, yeah, we can't take any shortcuts. We just need to hire. So anybody from HR that's interested in becoming a police officer, we have applications.
Well, if we had a K-9 and weapons, just saying.
That's great. Are we on, I guess we're on reports? Anybody,
My only.
do you have a report?
My only report was going to be on the line of, the refund on the workers' compensation that we're going to see. We'll see that at our next board meeting. And a lot of it has to do with Bob getting out in the field, working with folks, but a lot of it has to do with our employees who listen and do what's expected of them. As evidence, we had a safety officer here a few years ago, Brian McConnell. He inculcated into our organization the concept that if you back into a parking space when you're arriving, you have a much less tendency to hit something whenever you leave, because whenever you leave is when you're usually in a hurry. If you look out in our parking lot and you look at the preponderance of people who back into their parking spaces, it gives you a good idea who's listening.
Very good. When we have that savings from workman's comp, for example, where do those funds go?
Right now, I asked that question yesterday, and there's a procedural issue with respect to being able to apply that to next year's work comp premiums and things like that. Currently, it just goes back into the general fund.
Okay.
But in order to do that, if we wanted to allocate it for a specific thing, we would do it based on a purchase order basis, and so that we would apply it back to that particular line item thing. So those are things that we can make adjustments to.
Not on our work comp, but on our insurance. I know we're on a plan.
Should save us about $100,000.
So my suggestion would be, and I know we discussed this briefly, but one board can't commit to another board of what they will or won't do with those funds. And I know we really wanted, the intent was clearly to keep those funds so we can go to the next step. So one thought I had was, what if we took that, say, whatever, 100,000, and use that money to prepay next year's insurance so it's not available, so those funds can be used specifically for the purpose of what we intended?
Okay. I'm not sure that the fund accounting works that way, but we can make it work how the board directs.
Okay.
I mean, that's the one thing that, the accounting rules are set up to facilitate making sure you're doing the right things, but there's always a way to make sure you can do the right thing. It just might take a little extra accounting work is all.
Yeah, and what I was obviously trying to accomplish is, I think the goal was very clear of what we wanted to do by making that change with our insurance. I also understand government, that if the funds are sitting there, somebody's going to find a use for those funds.
Right.
Not the intended use of what the plan was.
One thing that I talked to with Lisa several months ago had to do with establishing a separate fund out there that we could put that savings into, that we could then move those dollars over into that, knowing that we will realize those monies.
As a business owner, my wife and I had a fund, and it was called Do Not Touch, and that's where we would put funds. My concern is when government sees a fund that says do not touch, the question is, well, we could use that money for X. Okay, no other questions or comments? Any other reports?
Just a comment
Sure.
to that was, I'm with Jan that it can be done. There's a difference between savings and then restricting. And so in government, we have to be very careful. You don't want to put it somewhere where it restricts it, but that doesn't mean we can't save it. I think that is where we're at. We are saving it for the future, but it allows still a change of where that could go if we have to be careful in government not to put in a fund that restricts it. And we make those moves and then we can't unmove those, so.
Yeah. That's why my concept was to take those funds, and if we applied it to next year's premium, they wouldn't be, it would accomplish what we're trying to achieve without making the funds available, but we'll discuss that another time.
But we'll save them for that payment versus moving it to a fund. I think that's kind of what Jan is
Yeah, okay.
alluding to.
Okay. Any other reports? Hearing none, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion.
Second.
We have motion second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.